Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Friday Night Live with me, Hafiz Sha'ban, this Friday evening. It is Friday the 22nd of January 2021, corresponding to what I believe is the 8th of Jamad al-Thani, which is the 6th month of the Islamic calendar, 1442. As usual, we are broadcasting live to Luton on 105.1 FM and our partner stations, including Sheffield Link FM. Assalamu alaikum, Sheffield. Peterborough, salam. Derby, Nottingham, salamu alaikum to all our listeners in Peterborough, in Derby, in Nottingham and elsewhere. For listeners elsewhere in the UK, internationally or nationally, you can of course tune in via the Inspire FM app, also via the Inspire FM website. You can listen to us live on the Inspire FM website, YouTube, Facebook. So do tune in and do remember to leave us a comment, like tonight's show, and leave us your feedback. Most importantly, try to join tonight's conversation. Always good to hear from you, and let us know what you're thinking with regards to any of the stories that we may be covering this evening. If you've got an opinion, a thought on a story that we're not covering tonight, share it with me. Share it with me. Let me hear what you're thinking. Let me hear what's on your mind this Friday evening. 01582 481 822 07779 481 822 07779 481 822. Now that's the number for SMS messages and WhatsApp messages, and I'm very lucky today because I've got an extra screen in front of me at home. So you know what, I can hopefully do my job of presenting a lot easier this evening, inshallah. Anyway, we are continuing to broadcast live from home, so we do apologize in advance for any technical issues during the transmission this evening, right? So what have we got lined up for you this evening? Right, as always, a jam-packed show. We are discussing American politics. American politics. So Biden's presidency was inaugurated this week. What does that mean for America? What does it mean for the new presidency? Where now for America? We're going to be exploring this question with a number of experts that we're going to be speaking to later on. It's going to be very, very interesting. In fact, that's our lead story. So we're going to be diving straight into that story shortly after my introductions. We're going to then come back very, very close to home in Luton. And there's been a lot of stress that is being caused to a lot of our fellow citizens, Luton citizens, as stories have emerged, social media messages have emerged, videos have emerged of the flooding in the Vale cemetery. We've got Luton Borough Council, head of Luton Borough Council. We've got some concerned, we've got a funeral director, and we've got some messages from some concerned individuals from the local community. We're going to be speaking to them, what's been happening, and what is the council doing about the Vale cemetery flooding. I know there's been a lot of messages going around on this topic. If you want to speak to me, you want to get your thoughts across to me, 07779 481 822. Then we come back to Europe. We're discussing France at 7 p.m. French government bans 9 masajid. Right, that's an alarming headline. French government bans 9 masajid in a desperate attempt to punish Muslim communities. So one of the columnists writes. We're going to be speaking to what's happening in France and why the government has tried to ban, or in fact has banned 9 mosques in France. And last but not least, we're going to be going over to Australia and Qatar and following the story of an Australian professor and his son who were released after 6 months from being held in a secret jail in Qatar. Now, I've got a personal relationship with this Australian professor because you know what? I spent some time with him in Kuwait whilst I was working out in Kuwait in 2007. A lovely fella, an academic, a professional, and a very good citizen is what I saw when I met him in 2007. I want to follow that story with Cage and find out what's been happening. So that's the lineup this evening. 015824818220779481822 is the number here in the studio. Why don't we go straight into our lead story, right? So our lead story, we're going to be discussing with some fantastic guests that the production producers have lined up for us this evening. We've hopefully got Byron Harris, Washington-based correspondent for the National. He was previously the congressional correspondent for Monitor and the White House assistant correspondent for one of the Japan's newspaper, and he's also written extensively. So great to have Byron Harris with us. And also we're going to have Professor Robert Singh, Department of Politics at Birkbeck University of London, specialist in contemporary US politics and politics of American foreign policy. So welcome, Rob, and welcome, Byron. Great to have you with us on Friday Night Live.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Right. So, wow, what a week it's been. In fact, what an incredible couple of weeks it's been in American history. Anyone who follows American politics, it's been quite a turbulent period. I think the last couple of days, it seems to be transitioning into some kind of a stability mode as opposed to the kind of turbulence that we've had over the last couple of weeks. Byron, what do you make of it? Capitol Hill attack, the Trump legacy, 20,000 national troops overseeing an inauguration. That's incredible. I've seen even the term banana republic being used for the estate. I mean, it's incredible stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, certainly not something we're usually used to seeing here in the United States. So it's been an interesting few weeks. You started on Wednesday, January 6th. You had an attempted insurrection at the Capitol. It had never been stormed before, other than in 1814, the British did it during the War of 1812. First time that's happened since then. A week later, you had an impeachment vote in the House, which is the lower chamber here in the U.S., because Democrats are accusing President Donald Trump of inciting the attempted insurrection, which was an attempt to stop Congress from certifying the election results. And then the week after, you had Joe Biden's inauguration. So yeah, it's been a tumultuous few weeks. Donald Trump's last day was Wednesday morning. And it is already, just in terms of the general atmosphere here in Washington alone, it is somewhat night and day. The inauguration itself was very unusual because we had a heavily militarized presence. More than 25,000 or about 25,000 National Guard troops stationed in Washington. Pretty much the entire downtown city was in lockdown. So it's something we've never seen before here. So just very bizarre. That's easing up now that the inauguration is over. Joe Biden is in the White House. Donald Trump has gone to his Florida estate. It's not over for him yet, though, because the way it works in the U.S., the House, which is the lower chamber, votes on impeachment, and then the upper chamber, the Senate, has to have a trial. And obviously he's out of office, but the significance there is Trump has not so subtly hinted that he wants to run for president again in 2024. And if Democrats get 17 Republicans who vote with him on impeachment, they could effectively block him from running again in 2024.
Yeah. Thanks for that quite thorough opening comment. Let me go straight to Rob Singh. Rob, welcome to Friday Night Live. I mean, Biden is in his inauguration speech. This is America's Day. This is democracy's day, a day of history and hope, of renewal and resolve. I mean, he's taken very little time in issuing a number of executive orders, right? 17 apparently were signed, key policy reforms, directly opposing, kind of pro-Trump kind of initiatives and legislation and direction. Do you see a significant change from Trump in Biden, Rob?
Oh, unquestionably, as much as anything, it's just a return of professionalism and competence to the White House and the executive branch, frankly. Regardless of the content of what he does, it's actually going to be thorough, thought through, relying on experts, scientists, and so forth. And obviously he's heading, in many respects, particularly on domestic policy, in a very, very different direction. Yeah. I think we're going to have to wait. The jury's going to be out on how much continuity and how much change is going to characterize the foreign affairs side. But I mean, even there, the world, at least allies of the United States, are breathing a sigh of relief.
Absolutely, no doubt about that. But tell me more about the incoming administration, Baron. I mean, a number of appointees. Is it new faces, old system? I mean, there's a lot of talk about some of the individuals that have been appointed, former executives of multinational corporations, a lot of money being thrown around. Well, that's not new, is it? That's been happening for administration after administration, which, you know, all almost goes towards those kind of allegations that, you know what, it's still going to be the corporate interest, the capitalists that are really going to be at the forefront and driving policy making.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I think it's fair to say that's a fairly accurate assessment. The best way to look at Biden's term is basically Barack Obama's third term. A lot of the staffers he's appointed, very familiar to anyone who will cover the Obama presidency. There is a move to have more diverse faces, so more women, more people of color at the cabinet level. But in terms of day-to-day actual policy, Biden is kind of going to take the more Obama approach of governing more from the center, which means you know, a lot of the conventional wisdom about things like the global international order, more of the sort of capitalist laissez-faire economic approach is kind of more their mindset. Certainly nothing like you had the Bernie Sanders wing of the party campaigning on, which was more about social democracy. So yeah, of course, the interesting thing there is it will be interesting to see how that plays out in the 2022 and 2024 elections, because of course Trump won the presidency campaigning against kind of the conventional political status quo, which is pretty much back in place. Of course, you know, whether or not Trump fulfilled his campaign promises, he did not, for the most part, is an entirely different story.
Yeah. Well, what about with regard to? I mean, I'll come to Rob in a minute and ask a similar question to him. I mean, it's great. You know, a lot of you know, a huge sigh of relief, as Rob said, some professionalism and some kind of, you know, common sense comes into the White House, and people will be, you know, around the world, you know, taking a sigh of relief with regards to that. But I mean, there's very, very tough days ahead. You know, a global credibility of the states. You know, Biden himself said a compelling case that despite national fractures that are as deep as at any time since the Civil War, right? Economy, jobs, you know, the coronavirus, right? The job was only started, and it's a very, very tough few weeks and months ahead, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the problems with the Trump administration goes well beyond ideology, as Rob was saying. Basically, it was an issue of basic governance competence. So, you know, a big emphasis on the COVID-19 response. Obviously, there are all the issues with the, you know, Republicans starting to embrace and kind of stoke this anti-mask sentiment. And like kind of flouting social distancing stuff. They didn't really lay the groundwork for a vaccine distribution program. They did a little bit. It's getting out to the states, but it was very slow within the final few weeks of the administration. So that's something Biden focused on yesterday in terms of doing basic things that you would expect any president to do, regardless of ideology, like mobilize the Federal Emergency Management Agency to create a federal response to assist states and localities. So, you know, getting like vaccines out first, non-ideological stuff like that, that's kind of where the sigh of relief comes from. But as you pointed out, we have all these underlying issues with regards to you know, economic inequality, racial disparities, and you know, it remains to be seen whether they do something substantially different than what they did under the Obama years that kind of led to a lot of the pro-Trump movement.
All right. Okay. Let me go over to Rob. Rob, of course, you specialize, I believe, in not only contemporary U.S. politics, but also the politics of American foreign policy. I mean, a number of initiatives, you know, that he's obviously indicated very, very quickly on the issue of foreign policy. I mean, it's going to be interesting, isn't it, to see what are going to be the distinct differences, apart from a bit more rational and a bit more, you know, professional approach in engagement and discourse, whether it, you know, when it comes to you know, Israel, when it comes to Middle East, when it comes to Russia, and even Europe, right? What are you expecting to see the key differentiating factors between Biden and the kind of rash of Trump?
I suppose, I mean, one thing will simply be his natural inclination is to act with others and as partners in a multilateral way rather than a unilateral one. And he doesn't, treat alliances like NATO or with Japan and South Korea as a kind of protection racket where he can extort money on a transactional basis from them in the way Trump has. So that's going to be a kind of return to normal. So you would expect, I mean, he's already, taken the US back into the Paris Climate Accords. He's clearly looking to get back into the Iran nuclear deal in some way, although there are going to be real tensions there with the Israelis and the Saudis on that issue, and it could be a real flare point for him. He's got a problem with North Korea, as every president has had, frankly, for the last 2 decades. He's got a problem with Russia, where he's giving sort of mixed signals already. He wants a 5-year extension of the New START agreement that's due to expire in a few days. But at the same time, he's looking for a complete revision of the relationship. He's not starting off as every president since Clinton has done, saying he wants to reset. And perhaps above all, he's got China. So there's a hell of a lot on his plate. And again, I think that's why we should be cautious about thinking that just because Trump has gone, somehow everything is going to change. It isn't. It never does, frankly, with the US.
I mean, Robbie, you mentioned Iran, and that was going to be, one of my questions to you. I mean, that's going to be it's going to be a challenging, a navigation kind of Biden with regards to Iran. As you rightfully said, the Saudis and Israel had a very comfortable relationship with Trump. Whatever you say, whatever I say, or whatever the world says with regard to Trump and his 4 years, I mean, the Saudis were very happy with Trump, and so was Israel. I mean, he gave them quite a lot when it comes to putting them into a position of strength, right?
Absolutely.
So opening up the negotiations and the nuclear conversation and their deal with Iran is going to make those partners fairly uncomfortable. How do you think he's going to be able to navigate that challenge?
Well, I think it's going to be really difficult because already in the US press, you're seeing outlets today saying, look, if Biden is going to try and resurrect a nuclear deal, then he's got a problem because the Israelis and the Saudis are basically doing the playbook that Obama faced, which is, well, if you are going to do this, there's a large chance of war in the region. Add on to that Biden seems to want to end the Yemen war and is clearly much more antagonistic towards the Saudis than Trump or even Obama was. There are real problems there because the Republicans will see this as a real opportunity to bash Biden as being weak on foreign policy, just as they tried it with Obama previously, relatively successfully, actually, it has to be said. So it's going to be very, very difficult, particularly since really this is not his priority when it comes to foreign affairs. I mean, he like to be fair to Trump and Obama wanted to get away from the Middle East, frankly, and kept on getting dragged back in. And add on to that, finally, from the Iranian point of view, they've got elections coming up in the summer. And from their point of view, their hardliners are already saying, as some others are saying, well, the United States has got a new president, but it doesn't have a new America. So can we trust this? What if Trump comes back in 2024? There's all sorts of problems there.
But Byron, I mean, of course, foreign policy is integral to any nation, and quite rightly for America, especially being in the position of being the policeman of the world almost, so as to speak. But I mean, to what extent is that going to be a bigger issue for Biden than national and domestic policy and getting his credibility? We talked about some of the low-hanging fruits that are gonna be hopefully there for Biden to pick up on. But is the focus for Biden going to be more national and more America first kind of based, or do you think that foreign policy is going to be equally as important for the US?
Oh, yeah. What's interesting? Before the pandemic happened, during the primary, or the initial, or not during the primary, but the the initial plan had been for, I think, for Biden to focus on international affairs because he had a lot of breadth of experience as vice president, chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and have Harris focusing on domestic affairs. Now he doesn't have much of a choice. With the pandemic and the economic crisis, he has to very much focus on the U.S. That said, as Rob pointed out, he still is very much committed to multilateralism. So you're not going to see this sort of talk of these massive things like these massive aid cuts that Trump wanted to do, and that's actually a big priority for his administration, restoring the big aid overhaul and the cuts to places like the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza and in Yemen as well, which the Trump administration ended. So you'll see things like that. So it's definitely not America first. That said, there is talk within both major parties now of ending endless wars. Afghanistan is the longest war in the history of this country. Since Afghanistan and Iraq, there's just not a whole lot of appetite for foreign intervention. But at the same time, one thing I would really look to, as they always say they want to get out of the Middle East and pivot to Asia, China, you had his nominees very much vowing, his intelligence director and his nominee for Secretary of State vowing to take a much more assertive stance on China. You have a bunch of senators from both parties saying, yeah, you need to do that. So if you look at U.S. history, first you had containing the Soviet Union. You can argue we have a similar policy with that with regards to Iran right now. So this mindset within much of the foreign policy community in D.C. very much still revolves around containment. So on one hand, you have a public that wants to avoid international wars. On the other hand, China doesn't really poll popularly with them right now either. So you have to wonder if you're going to see a lot of the dynamics we see played out in places like the Middle East and during the Cold War with the Soviet Union playing out with China and the Asia Pacific now.
All right, so you bring me nicely onto China, Rob. I mean, it's gonna be a very interesting challenge, isn't it? Last couple of days of Trump's administration haven't gone too well with the Chinese, with the accusation of genocide amongst the Uyghur Muslims, levied against China, but that's going to be, I mean, Iran is fine and Saudi and those things continue, but they are nowhere as big of a challenge as an obstacle for America than China is, obviously the rival, leading nations around the world. How do you see that navigating? What are your kind of, predictions with regards to that relationship? I mean, of course, they both need each other. It's not a case of, and continuing to antagonize and continue more acrimonious. How do you see it panning out?
I think, frankly, a lot of this is in Beijing's hands. It's clear that if there's one element of bipartisanship in Washington that's really rare, it's on China now. Both parties want a more assertive policy. I think Biden will want to go away from the kind of tariff-based attacks on China that Trump engaged in to no real effect. And we'll be emphasizing things on technology, on 5G, on AI, on reassuring the kind of democratic allies, the Quad, India, Australia, Japan, better relations with South Korea, maybe perhaps looking at getting back into the Trans-Pacific Partnership to counter China's economic weight. But the thing is, frankly, China cannot be ignored. When Clinton took over in 1993, America's economy was 20 times the size of China's. China's is now 3/4 the size of America's. So it simply cannot be ignored in this way. So I think the other thing that Biden will probably do will be looking to see if he can get the EU to finally pick a side and side with the United States on this rather than staying on the fence, essentially. And that's going to be, I think, not as easy as some people are anticipating, frankly.
Very difficult. And we've got about a minute left, Byron. I just wanted to come back to more domestic front. Racial tension, divided America. How's Biden is he going to be able to solve these problems and build those bridges, especially when it comes to the racial tensions that have existed and have really escalated over the last couple of years?
That he focused on unity a lot in his speech, so that's something he clearly wants to do. I am personally not optimistic. This is, a lot of people say this is kind of the original sin of how this country was founded. It was a very heavily dependent on Black slave labor. And you see those divisions playing out. A large part of the Trump movement was kind of rooted in white identity politics, white nationalism, Christian fundamentalism, which is increasingly becoming fused with white nationalism. Meanwhile, you still have Black Americans and frankly just Americans of color in general at very harsh disadvantages economically and at the criminal justice system that's going away either.
Unfortunately, we've run out of time. Brian Harris and Professor Robert Singh, thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Right, listeners, that was Brian Harris and Professor Robert Singh, and we were discussing America and we were discussing Biden's inauguration. I would love to hear from my listeners. What are your thoughts with regards to the inauguration of Biden? Do you see a huge change between Trump and Biden? What does it mean for the Muslim community in America? And what does it mean for Muslims around the world? 07779411822. We're about to go into a commercial break. When we come back, we will be discussing a story very close to the heart of the Lutonians, and that is the Vale Cemetery flooding. Don't go away.
Assalamu alaikum. In Luton and its surrounding areas, it is now time for Salat al-Isha.
लुटन और इसके मज़ाफ़ात में नमाज़ इशा का वक्त हुआ चाहता है.
This azan has been sponsored by Ideal Properties. Contact us on 01582 721110 or log on to www.idealpropertiesltd.co.uk.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
اللهم رب هذه الدعوة التامة والصلاة القائمة آت محمدا الوسيلة والفضيلة وابعثه مقاما محمودا الذي وعدته إنك لا تخلف الميعاد.
Would you like to sponsor the Azan? If so, give us a call on 01582 481 810 or email us on info@inspirefm.org.
From the studios of Inspire FM, the time is now 6:30.
Assalamualaikum. Welcome back to Friday Night Live. It is Friday the 22nd of January and I am your host Hafiz Sha'ban. It's just turned past the half an hour, so we're looking at approximately 1831, and we have been discussing American politics and the inauguration of Joe Biden in America in the first half an hour. So a very interesting conversation with some fantastic academics and political commentators on the United States of America, and where now for America. 01582 481 822 0779 481 822 for your SMS and WhatsApp messages. And I'm looking at my third screen that I have in front of me, and I don't have any messages, right? So listeners, I want to hear from you because the next story is a very local story, and I know it's really captured the emotions, the sentiments, and the feelings of a lot of our local residents, right? And indeed, why shouldn't it, right? And then what we're talking about is the Vale Cemetery, right? So the Vale Cemetery flooding. And of course, families have been left disgusted after graves at Luton Vale Cemetery have been waterlogged following flooding, right? And a number of videos have been circulating. A petition has been set up, and it's actually got almost 6,000 people signing up on that petition within, I think, I don't know whether it was 24, 48, or or 72 hours, but that's a lot of signatories within a couple of days of a petition being set up, right? Now, the video footage shows large sections of the Vale Cemetery submerged in floodwaters, with, of course, residents distressed by the damage to their loved ones' graves. 01582 481 822 0779 481 822. If you have been personally impacted, right, or if you know of a family member or a friend that's been impacted, I would love to hear your thoughts live on the radio or via SMS and WhatsApp. And I know it can be very, very emotional, and I do apologize for this in advance, right? But we need to discuss it, and I'm really glad to say that the Luton Borough Council Chief Executive Robin Porter has very kindly decided to join us, and we're also going to have Khadija Malik, portfolio holder for public health and commissioning. Unfortunately, Tariq Aziz from Central Funeral Services is now not going to be joining us. So I want to hear from the community members, right? So community members, I want to hear from you. SMS, WhatsApp, please, and we can put any questions, any concerns directly to the council themselves. You're not going to get any better opportunity than this. So let me welcome Robin Porter, Chief Executive, Luton Borough Council. Welcome to Friday Night Live, Robin.
Good evening, and thank you so much for inviting us to join you this evening. Fantastic,
great to have you with us. But we are discussing a very kind of a distressing story, unfortunately, because as these things happen and go around on social media, but this has really become viral. A lot of videos going around, a lot of messages going around, a lot of petitions going around. And as you can rightly understand, families have been left disgusted at the situation at the Vale Cemetery. The obvious question is, why is it taking so long for the Luton Borough Council to do something about it?
Well, just let me start by saying, on behalf of the council, and I'm sure Councillor Malik will come in a second, we are absolutely and truly sorry for the distress that's been caused to the families in the recent weeks due to the waterlogging and also the mud situation at the Vale. Our thoughts and prayers are absolutely with those who have lost loved ones in these recent times.
That's great. I mean, the question is, Robin, is why is it taking the Luton Borough Council so long to address this? Now, I'm reading a number of comments that I'm receiving. I've got a certain Mrs. Begum who says that she's been petitioning the council for a long time, and this is a known issue and should have been addressed with long time ago, but it hasn't been addressed by the council a long time ago. I mean, what would you say? How do you respond to that?
I think we need to look at the issues separately. Over the last week, we've had substantial issues with regards to waterlogging. That's a new issue. It's different to the land quality and the soil situation that we've got up at the Vale. But just to focus on the waterlogging for a second, that's been a situation that the members of the public that I've spoken to, that Councillor Malik's spoken to, people have never seen a situation as bad as it's been over the last couple of weeks. We're taking and have taken, under Councillor Malik's and the executive's direction, taken immediate action. This week, we've put in place a legal agreement with the landowner of the adjacent site to the Vale, where a lot of the water seems to have been coming off that land onto the Vale site. A legal agreement has been signed in the last couple of days. We've got staff who are going on site, we've got a contractor that's going on site onto that adjacent land over the weekend to create some emergency swales to try and address the runoff that's coming from the adjacent site. Again, under the direction of Councillor Malik and her executive colleagues.
Okay. All right, let's bring in Councillor Khadija Malik into this conversation, because Khadija Malik, I'm sure you're in touch with the local community. I'm hearing from a lot of the community members very distressed, not happy, and quite frankly, pointing the finger at Luton Borough Council for being too slow, too little, too late, right? How do you respond to that? And secondly, more importantly, what is the current situation? I know I'm reading reports that the council has instructed engineers to go on site to review the drainage in the area of the cemetery. What is the current situation at the cemetery right now?
First of all, I'd just like to say that any concerns that were raised with me in terms of being at the Vale have always been, I've always taken back to the council, and we have tried to address them. And like Robin said, when I was going up there, the water log, as far as it is right now, I have been going up there for the last 7 months. Now, there's no excuses about anything, but I think it's very good to know that we did take action. We had services which did not look very nice, and I had many complaints, which we went back and we agreed and we put footpaths in, and we made the side of it really good. There was seeping water that was there, which was noticed around April time, etc., but it was not as bad as what's been now. The rain hasn't helped us at all with there. It's clay down there, but we've taken it. The condition was really bad, and I can say and apologise, just like Robin, to the community in terms of the situation that's there. I myself have there, so it does affect me as a community living here in Luton as well. We've taken it back, and like Robin said, we took it to the executive. They did take it very seriously and put measures in place, like the engineers. Currently today, this afternoon, specifically at 3 o'clock, I went down to have a look at what the situation was like. The water had been retained on the other side, and when the swales come in, we're hoping that this will alleviate the water which is right next to the graveyard at the moment. And there is bits that are slipping through in terms of coming into that. But we must understand that it's not soil and it is clay. And when it's clay, it gets very mucky. but the actions that Robin has taken has made it look much better within a couple of days. And the officers were out there straight away on a Sunday morning and didn't leave things till Monday.
Okay. All right, let me go to my listeners. 01582481822, 07779481822. What are your thoughts? We are speaking to the Luton Borough Council. It's a great opportunity. You don't get these kind of opportunities every day to raise any direct questions with Robin Porter or Khadija Malik. They're lending their valuable time this evening. Of course, they are accountable to the local community, but they are giving us their valuable time to address any questions, concerns. And I know there's been a lot of concerns, a lot of messages going around with regards to this cemetery flooding. If you've got any questions, any comments, anything that you want to raise, 07779481822 is the number to get those messages across to me. Let me go back to Robin. Robin, thank you very much for some of the initiatives that the council is taking. I'm sure that's going to be welcomed. And I don't know. I mean, it's easy to throw accusations and say, well, why isn't the council doing X, Y, and Z? And at the moment we are going through a challenging situation. I also appreciate that there's a lot of services that are going to be really challenged. Budgets are going to be challenged, etc., etc. But as I was quoting earlier from Mrs. Begum, she says, quite rightly, we pay a lot of money for the plots plus the cost of the headstones, but Luton Borough Council doesn't seem to care, right?
Yeah, I fundamentally, the team that we've got absolutely cares. Our 48 councillors absolutely care. We are devastated, as are the families, about the situation up at the Vale. We, as we've talked about, we've put in place some immediate actions. In addition to those, we've deployed a dedicated cleansing team who are there 7 days a week. I was with them very, very early on Tuesday morning, pre-dawn on Tuesday morning, and they are working tirelessly to try and ensure that the situation is managed as well as possible. It is, as you quite rightly say, a really challenging situation. We've gone from a normal burial rate of about 7 to 8 burials a week to up to 25 at the moment, due to the awful and virulent pandemic that are facing the world at the moment. That's a real challenge situation. These are not excuses. We go back to the initial point that absolutely we want and we need everybody to be able to go to the Vale, to enjoy the solitude, to be able to pay their respects to their loved ones, to grieve appropriately. And we have been working really hard with faith representatives to ensure that we can put in place appropriate measures as possible. This week, in agreement with executive members and also with the faith representatives, we've commissioned a new burial area that we'll be using for the next few months. That should help the land up in the current corner of the Vale to recover, because it's really important. It's a difficult situation. We're unfortunately having to dig a number of graves every single day, and with the conditions up there, it makes it even worse. Which is we've put in place a dedicated cleansing team. They're 7 days a week.
Right. Robin, whilst you were discussing that, I mean, I think some of our listeners would be very interested in terms of what is that roadmap for the improvement of the facilities within the cemetery that we're talking about, and just generally also other cemeteries if this problem indeed extends to those, and what's the timeline around getting this not only this problem of waterlogging fixed, but also I know there's other improvements that you refer to: improved access, constructing new footpaths, cleaning, etc. What is the kind of timeline around getting these enhancements fully operational, in the current context?
Well, again, under direction of the executive members, we've taken short-term actions. So the bund that's been created, the legal agreements with the adjacent landowner, which we've signed this week, the swale that we'll be creating on the adjacent site. So all of these are immediate actions. In the medium term, and when I'm talking about medium term, I'm talking about the next 6 months. We're going to be doing substantial improvement works to the drainage. Next week, we will be starting a full ground investigation survey to find out what's going on underneath the ground, so we can put appropriate measures in place. They will be put in place over the next 6 months. And then into the longer term, Councillor Malik and her executive members have agreed already to an extension of the Vale to ensure that we've got more land. And when we've got more land, we can more appropriately be utilising that space. Obviously, with the Vale getting towards the point of capacity currently, it gives us very, very little space to work on. So it's imperative that we do expand the Vale so that we've got that additional space for the next 20 years.
All right, fantastic. Thank you very much, Robin, for that. I mean, I could have asked you the next question also, but I think it'll be unfair not to direct it towards Councillor Khadija, actually, who's been very patient. Khadija, I mean, Robin touched upon it in terms of the current challenges that we're facing as a community, nationally, internationally, with regards to this pandemic. And I mean, it was really interesting to hear the statistics. I mean, 7 to 10 burials, going all the way up to 20 plus burials per week. I mean, that's just quite incredible, isn't it? How is the council? What is the situation when it comes to the burial sites, in terms of capacity versus, and what are you seeing? I mean, Robin's alluded towards, increasing that capacity to facilitate the current kind of challenges, but just give us some reassurances in terms of what the council is doing about this current situation, and and just to reassure the community that that planning is well in hand.
You were sort of breaking up some from what I can make of what you said there. It wasn't very clear, but in terms of going up, my role as public health, we're always having that communication.
We've got a lot of interference coming from your side, I think. But
I'm on my own.
No, it's the network. But okay, let's try again. Let's try it one more time.
Okay, sorry. In terms of me, if we look at the timescale of what I can see, for me being up at the Vale for the last 7 months, literally every single day, and what I've seen, I can say in terms of the council really doing some work that I didn't see would happen in that timescale. Within 6 months, we were able to see that land that was leveled out with the footpaths going in. We are going to be having the features going in there, and everything that was agreed with me when I went in up the community. And this was through the community and myself that we saw things that they wanted a change on, and the difficulties we're in financially, and giving that the numbers going up and how we the community have been affected. I took this to our officers, and we were able to find something where they didn't have any money, and that was something that I didn't expect. And I'll be honest, as a councillor, I did not expect them to be able to do these works, and yet they did listen to us and were able to do that. What I would really like to say to the community today is I totally understand, and I'm with you with your grief in terms of that, because I've had my own loved ones that I've lost, and not for a moment would I leave them behind or not support them in making sure that their voices, in whatever ways we can do to mitigate whatever's happening up there with the action that the council have taken. I'm confident we'll be able to move forward and address this issue, and by the summer we will see that place would look really, really nice, like it was last summer, while we were to have that peaceful time that we can go up and pray be with our loved ones that have passed away. That time that's there for grieving. We're not able to do those things on our own. And I would really like those families that want to go up there and take a bit of time now and sit there, really be able to do that, just like myself. So, I would really like to, I apologise to them on behalf of the council as well in terms of what the situation there is, but I've seen change, and I believe we will see the change again in terms of what's happening up there at the moment.
Right, Councillor Khadija Malik, thank you very much for your time. I mean, there was a lot of interference whilst you were speaking. I think it must be the Wi-Fi or a signal or whatever it was. But thank you very much for your time, Councillor Khadija Malik, for this evening. I've just got a last question for Robin. Robin, maybe you could hear Councillor Khadija a lot clearer than I could, potentially, and I'm not sure because I can still hear that interference, and I'm going to reach out to the producers. I don't know if that interference is coming from my side or where it's coming from. But Robin, whilst we've got you here, it's not always that we get a chance to speak to you, so it's great to take this opportunity whilst you're here. I mean, these last couple of months must have been very, very challenging for the Luton Borough Council. And it still seems a good few months of this pandemic continuing well into the spring, if not longer. I mean, great to see some headlines this evening to say that the R rate is actually, slightly dropping, which potentially the outbreak could now be shrinking, which is fantastic news, right? But we're still not quite towards the end. How has the Luton Borough been able to cope over the last couple of months? What have been the key challenges for the Luton Borough Council, and what's your kind of message to the community?
I think the key challenge has been trying to keep people as safe as possible. It's an evil pandemic, and it's affecting households up and down the country, and particularly in Luton, we have been really affected by this pandemic. My message to our town would be, please, yes, the vaccine's coming. Yes, there is light at the end of the tunnel. Yes, we've got hope for normality later in the year. But in the interim, please remember the key messages of hands, face, space, and testing. Please, it's absolutely imperative that we keep our distance from those that aren't within our household bubble. It's absolutely imperative that we're doing everything possible to stop this evil pandemic from ripping through our community.
Right, fantastic. On that note, thank you very much, Robin Porter, Chief Executive of Luton Borough Council, for addressing some of the concerns of our community, our residents, and our questions. Khadija Malik, Portfolio Holder for Public Health and Commissioning, thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thank you so much. Jazakallah.
Thanks for you. Right, listeners, that was Robin Porter, Chief Executive, Luton Borough Council, with Khadija Malik, Portfolio Holder, Public Health and Commissioning. And unfortunately, we couldn't be joined by Tariq Aziz. We were addressing the concerns of the local community with regards to the Vale cemetery flooding. Now, you heard the responses directly from the horse's mouth from the council. Was that reassuring to hear that? Was that too little too late? But I mean, the word that I'm hearing from Khadija is that, she feels the sentiments, the thoughts and the emotions of the community. She herself has loved ones in that cemetery, and the council is doing and responding and reacting as quickly as it can. I mean, I did put that point to them that, this problem has been known for a while, and why the council hasn't done something about it before. All good to raise these questions in hindsight. But anyway, the council is reassuring that it's taking firm action, and the situation should be remediated, should be addressed very, very soon. It would have been good to speak to Mrs. Begum. Mrs. Begum was featured on Bedfordshire Live and had a lot of comments to make with regards to the current situation. Understandably, she also has very close loved ones who are buried there, and just to go to the graveyard and visit one's loved ones is a painful experience. And then for the entirety of the area to be surrounded or waterlogged making it almost impossible for to actually go and spend a moment or two in solitary, kind of remembrance and reflection is even more painful. But anyway, 01582481822 07779481822 is the number here in the studio. So we're just on the countdown now towards the commercial break, and subhanallah, we are already at the end of the first hour of the show. Right, and I'm the background music playing now, which is great, and the gadget seems to be going up and down by itself. All right, okay, we're going to go into commercial break in about 45 seconds. Okay, we are going to be coming back, and we're going to be discussing French government. Now, here's a headline for you: French government bans 9 Masjids in a desperate attempt to punish the Muslim community. I mean, what on earth is happening in France and why? So we're going to try to understand what's going on in France and what the French government is up to. So don't go away. Do join me in a couple of seconds. And then I've got a very emotional story that I'm going to be covering right at the end. We're going to be speaking to Cage, and we're going to be speaking to a caseworker who's been leading up a story of an Australian professor and son that were released from a secret jail in Qatar after 6 months of imprisonment. 01582481822 07779481822. Do get in touch with regards to any of the stories we're covering this evening when we come back from the commercial break. Until we come back from the commercial break, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
This program will continue after the break. Continue listening to Inspire FM. Inspire FM.
Inspire 105.1 FM.
I'm Aaron, creative producer of Ricky Cycle, an interactive live show for children, and this is Inspire FM 105.1.
Someone jogging, walking their dog, or working out in the park is highly likely to have COVID-19. This is a national health emergency. Around 1 in 3 people have no symptoms and are spreading it without knowing. So exercise locally. If you're on your own, you can meet one other person. But keep your distance. Exercise, don't socialize. And wash your hands the moment you get home. Stop the spread. Stick to the rules. If you bend the rules, people will die. Stay home. Protect the NHS. Save lives.
Biscott Pharmacy, your one-stop health and beauty pharmacy in Luton, stockist of over 8,000 health and beauty products. At Biscott Pharmacy, we offer a range of services, including health advice and repeat prescriptions for collection and delivery to your home. We also offer a Hajj and Umrah vaccination. Come in and see us and ask about our Stop Smoking service. We're open 7 days a week till late, including bank holidays. Biscott Pharmacy, 157A Biscott Road, Luton. Call 457709.
Assalamu alaikum. Bismillah. قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم من رغب عن سنتي فليس مني. That whoever abandons my sunnah is not from me.
Why do Tops Pizza deliver the top pizzas in Luton? For a start, all the toppings are 100% halal and Tops use fresh dough every day. Then there's the cheese, the highest quality available. And when it comes to food preparation, cleanliness is taken as part of our faith. So that just leaves the taste, choice, and great offers, including buy one, get one free on all medium, large, and extra large pizzas. Tops Pizzas, Wellington Street, LU1 5AA. Order online, topspizza.com or via Just Eat. Download our app or call 01582 72 5000.
If your child's leaving primary school in the summer and moving into secondary education in September, you'll be pleased to know that Moorlands is once again an excellent and exciting independent school option. With small classes and focused tutoring, Moorlands can help your child to flourish and achieve their own personal best. With affordable school fees, half the national average. Find out more about setting your child on the road to a brighter future at kingshousemoorlands.com or call Luton 573376.
Winter in Syria is brutal. Excessive snow, sub-zero temperatures and freezing rain cause floods and unlivable conditions. Whilst we see winter as a time for cosy nights by the fire, for many, winter is simply a fight for survival. You can change this by providing warm food, clothes, and blankets from just £20. The pandemic will make this the worst winter of their lives. Protect them. Visit sktwelfare.org or call 0300 30 20 786.
आज भी हम दीन के मामलों में लाइल्मी की वजह से बहुत सारी गलत फहमियों में मुब्तला हैं और इल्म हासिल करना हम पर फ़र्ज़ है। हमारे इल्म में इजाफा करने के लिए मैं पेश करती हूँ प्रोग्राम दीन और दुनिया हर मंगल की सुबह 11 से 12 बजे तक।
From the studios of Inspire FM, the time is now 7 o'clock.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome back to Friday Night Live with me, Hafiz Sha'ban, on this Friday, the 22nd of January 2021. Wow, we are almost towards the end of January already. It is the 8th of Jamad al-Thani, 1442, and we are broadcasting live to Luton. Luton, Assalamu alaikum. 105.1 FM, and we are also broadcasting live across our partner stations. Assalamu alaikum to our listeners in Sheffield, in Peterborough, in Derby, in Nottingham, and internationally, wherever you are listening to us, nationally, wherever you are listening to us. Do give us a thumbs up on any of our social media platforms so that we can give you a shout out and we know that you are listening to us. Facebook, YouTube, or any other platform. Don't forget to like us. Don't forget to leave a comment on any of our stories. I would be particularly interested in hearing some of our local residents with regards to that last story that we were covering. I mean, I know there's been so many messages going around social media platforms. I'm a bit surprised. I must admit, Luton, I'm a bit surprised I haven't heard your comments on Friday Night Live, right? Normally, mashallah, I've got a very active listenership. I get a message and say, Jazakallah for covering this story. This is a very important story. Maybe this evening you seem to be a bit busy, but if you have got a spare moment, 01582 481 822, 01582 481 822, and I'm not sure if I can speak to you live, but you know what? If you send me an SMS or a WhatsApp, I will try to get it across to my listeners. 07779 481 822, 07779 481 822, inshallah. Right, what time is it now? It is almost 3 minutes past the hour, inshallah. So let's go on to our next story. A bit of a disturbing story, not surprising on Friday Night Live. We cover a lot of these kind of gruesome, not gruesome, but sometimes a lot of negative news. That's almost the general trend at the moment, isn't it? With news always seems to be a very, very negative. Now, let me give you another a headline to consider. The French government has banned, effectively what it probably means is it's just closed down 9 of the Masjids in France in a desperate attempt to punish Muslim community. At least that's what one headline is reading, and I'm quoting from that headline. Another headline reads, French Muslim leaders sign charter pledging to combat political Islam. Now, that's an interesting one, isn't it? French Muslim leaders sign charter pledging to combat political Islam. I mean, why would they sign a charter pledging to combat political Islam? That's like saying we're going to combat the Sharia of Islam, or I don't know, any other aspect of Islam. I mean, if you're a Muslim, you're not going to be combating your own ideology and its faith. I'm a bit surprised what's happening there. But maybe the article actually continues and says the state-approved French Muslim leaders have signed a charter denouncing accusations of racism against France and pledging to recognize equality between men and women and to combat political Islam. I mean, it's all a bit confusing for me. Let me see if I can get my experts, right, to give us a bit of commentary on this topic and help us navigate through this story, right? It's a bit of an interesting story. But a bit of a strange one too, because why does it need Muslim leaders, right, to pledge to recognize equality between men and women? I mean, that's a bit of a bizarre one. I thought men and women were equal. It doesn't require a mullah to tell me that men and women are equal, right? And why are we getting Muslim leaders to combat political Islam? What's going on, right? 015824818220779481822. Let me pull up my notes so I can introduce you to my guest. I've got Brother Robert Carter, a British journalist and researcher at PTV UK. And I've got Sister Yasmin. Yasmin is a law and politics graduate, fantastic, currently working in public relations and a spokesperson for the Muslim Association of Britain. Okay, Matt, all right, great. And one of the co-signatories of the complaint to the UNHRC against France. So let's go to Sister Yasmin first. All right, I'm going to give the sisters a preference over here. Brother Robert, you can just wait for a moment. Sister Yasmin, welcome to Friday Night Live. Right, so you're involved. You're a co-signatory on one of the. Is this a complaint to the UNHRC against France? What's your reading of events in France? What's going on and why?
So firstly, thanks all for having me. So the Muslim Association of Britain has joined 36 international organisations from 13 different countries in a complaint submitted to the UNHCR against France. We're also in the coming days going to be submitting a complaint to the European Commission as well. So the complaint essentially details the French government's crackdown against the Muslim population and examples from as far as 1989. So we're not just talking about Macron's government, we're talking about previous administrations as well, where we've raised this complaint because Islamophobia has been institutionalized and state-sponsored within France. It's gone beyond the far right. It's now become the state that has cracked down on Muslims. So just this weekend, we're seeing 9 mosques being closing down. Previously, we've seen up to over 76 mosques closed down. We're seeing that imams must be state approved. We're seeing IDs for Muslim children that are homeschooled during the pandemic. We're also seeing that Muslims have to pay a tax if they wish to go to Hajj in order to combat radicalization. So this has all been, unfortunately, this is nothing new. Like I said, we have examples dating back to 1989. But now it's become a context where the far right has become normalized within Europe, and we felt that we had to take a stand and raise this with the UN.
All right, fantastic, right? The far right has become normalized in Europe, right? We're seeing this far right trend and tendency across Europe. What's the idea here going to the UN Human Rights Commission, Yasmin? What are you hoping to achieve?
So firstly, we want the UN to hold France to account. France cannot be allowed to be a co-signature of the UN and of its key charters and openly violate the civil rights of its Muslim population. France has the biggest Muslim population in Europe, and it's openly declaring a war against them. It is openly abusing their civil rights, cracking down on their freedom. France claims to be the land of freedom, liberty, and fraternity, yet that doesn't seem to apply to its Muslim population. And this is why we are going to both the UN and the European Commission.
Okay, all right. So it sounds ambitious and sounds logical to me. Let's bring in Brother Robert Carter, British journalist and researcher. Assalamu alaikum and welcome, Robert, to the show this evening. Your thoughts in terms of what's happening in France in a short while. But I mean, the headlines are almost ludicrous. You know that Muslim leaders have to sign a declaration pledging to recognize equality between men and women. I mean, that's just ridiculous, right? And to combat political Islam, right? You know, I mean, what is almost the allegation? And for someone to sign a charter to say, "I recognize equality between men and women," that's self-incriminating of almost new proportions. I mean, that's quite incredible, isn't it?
Walaikum salam. Well, thank you very much for having me on the show. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Yes, I think you've basically summed it up very, very well. The fact of the matter is, if we were to replace the fact that this is France with, say, another country, say from Africa or the Middle East, then there would be Western governments, I dare say, calling for regime change simply because of the authoritarian, totalitarian nature of the regime that's cracking down on its minorities. That's the fact of the matter. But because it's France, it's somehow given a free pass to basically treat Muslims however it likes. And what we're seeing is a very rapidly building snowball, which is becoming incredibly dangerous. Obviously, Yasmin has highlighted just some of the issues that are taking place, but ultimately you have to realize that it's not just the French government that's making these moves. French society, the majority of voters are turning very right-wing and are becoming very Islamophobic and racist in nature. And it seems as if Macron, who you have to remember, his reputation has already been very badly damaged domestically for a number of reasons, including brutalizing the Elevest protesters at the end of 2018 and throughout 2019. He's now opted to rebuild his fan base by turning to the right. And the best way, as we all know, to get more votes if you're in trouble as a politician is to scapegoat the Muslims. Nice and easy winning formula. Everyone's doing it these days. Trump, Italian politicians, even our own Boris Johnson at times when he needs, a little bit of extra push in the votes, he just comes out with some Islamophobic comments or takes a position against immigration, for example. Macron is taking it to a new level, and I'm very fearful for Muslims. In fact, I recently spoke to and interviewed Idris Si Hamedi. He was in the headlines because he was the founder of Baraka City, which is one of the biggest or the biggest Muslim charity in France. If you can Google Baraka City, it'll come up straight away if you haven't already heard the story. He's actually fled France for the time being. He's moved away to London now for the time being because he simply is worried about the French authorities. His charity was closed down. He was branded an extremist simply because he criticized, racist and Islamophobic caricatures of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. And he also criticized the French government and several ministers for their right-wing tendencies. He criticized them on Twitter. That's it. A series of tweets. He had his home raided. He was detained violently. By the way, he was injured in the detention, the arrest process. He was arrested in front of his wife and children. His wife was insulted by the riot police officers who broke into his home during the night in front of his children. She wasn't allowed to wear her hijab. She was also cuffed at the time. I do recommend anyone who hasn't heard this story already to check it out, because it's just one of the most prominent examples that's happened literally within the last couple of months that proves that the French government has a real problem with Muslims. And you have to realize the blanket terms that's being thrown, like political Islam is bad, conservative Islam is bad, Islamism, these types of blanket terms, they're being weaponized to great effect because they're so vague. And as you rightly mentioned, you don't quite know what exactly they mean by it. This program, for example, you could argue perhaps that we are all political Muslims here because we're on a political show talking about politics and we're all Muslim. Yeah. So what does that mean? We would be up for detention in France if we said the wrong thing, like France has an imperialist history and has a lot of Muslim blood on its hands, for example. That's the kind of thing that could potentially get you in big trouble in France. So it's a very worrying times, I have to say. But final point from me before you move on. The Islam Charter that you mentioned, that's been essentially a bunch of Muslim organizations have been strong-armed into signing. Not all of them have signed it. So out of 8 prominent Muslim groups that were asked to sign this charter, 3 of them have refused to do so, and it's because the language used, as you mentioned, is a very it basically accuses Islam of being oppressive and wrong, and they said, well, we can't sign it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's very insulting. But I mean, I'll go to Yasmin in a minute. But just coming back to yourself, Robert. I mean, the whole strategy of the French government seems to be the carrot and the stick, right? And they're trying to wedge this division amongst the Muslim community themselves and confuse them on some fundamental principles here. And it may seem to me, at least from some of the headlines that I'm seeing, that they're succeeding to a limited extent in trying to create this kind of a, palatable French government kind of a complicit kind of voice among certain quarters of the Muslim community by dangling the carrot or the stick, right? And the stick is, the 76 Masjids that are suspected of separatism, right? The 9 mosques that have been closed, the charity organizations that have been shut down, like you've just cited the examples of, and the list continues, that if you don't comply and if you don't do what we tell you to do, then you're gonna see the iron fist, right? But on the other hand, if you do actually toe the line that we give you, then we're happy for you to operate within a certain remit. I mean, it is, like Yasmin was saying earlier, full of contradiction. On the one hand, they claim the libertarianism and the liberty of caricatures and insulting the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but on the other hand, they can't take any criticism of the French policies and political Islam. What does that mean? So I can't speak out about Palestine. I can't speak out about international oppression. I can't speak out about Kashmir or what's happening in Kashmir. What on earth does that mean? But what from your research, Robert, and from who you've been speaking to and what you've been following, and maybe Yasmin can comment on this after yourself. What is the feedback? What are you hearing from France, from the Muslim community there? Is it obviously we know that it's not a completely monolithic and it's not a completely united front in response to this, and there is some division, but there seems to be at least some kind of alignment and some kind of a block forming to say that this is simply this is preposterous and this is ridiculous in terms of what the French government is trying to force us into this corner.
Yes, well, a few points I can mention. Yes, in many cases, you are banned. It is an attack on not only freedom of speech, but it's essentially thought policing of the Muslim community only. You have to remember that the anti-Islamism legislation that came in, it's only targeting Muslims. It's not targeting all faiths. It's not targeting all extremists. It's targeting Muslims only. You are actually banned from protesting for Palestine in France at the moment. Legislation was brought in because basically if you're pro-Palestine, you're branded as anti-Semitic. So you're not allowed to be pro-Palestine essentially in public in France almost. You are banned from desecrating the French flag. So there are laws in place to protect and to stop the offense of French patriots or right-wingers, if you like. But when it comes to Islam, you're given a total free reign. You can basically insult the Holy Prophet. It receives state backing. You remember you saw the images of Charlie Hebdo, a very racist, notorious magazine, were plastered over government buildings. So that's essentially the government saying, we support this hate speech, but when it comes to anything that offends us, no way, it's totally banned. So that does exist in France. Wow. When it comes to how are French Muslims feeling, I've been to France several times. I would have been more recently if it weren't for the restrictions. But yeah, they're terrified. I mean, you have to realize that France, it's portrayed as this beautiful secular Western nation with gold paved streets where everyone's free to do whatever they want. But actually, when you go there, it's quite the opposite. Their police force is very, very brutal, much more than anything you'd experience here, to some degree, because, you only have to look at the Yellow Vest protests. They were unarmed French people, mostly white French people, and they still got heavily brutalized on a week in, week out basis. And I was actually there. And now that same police force that brutalizes its own citizens for going out and demanding the government be held to account for, low wages and things like that, they're actually now turning their attentions to the Muslims. The way in which they police is very extreme, very violent. They're willing to basically beat you up during detention. And it is very, very frightening. And I think a lot of French Muslims are deeply intimidated. And that's exactly what Macron wants. He wants to intimidate them, shut them up any way he can, and he's prepared to use violence to do so, as we've seen in the past.
All right, so we've got about 7-8 minutes remaining. I want to focus on what we can do, right? What we can do to actually highlight the situation, brings some kind of accountability, brings some transparency, brings some spotlight in terms of what's happening, and try to get some voices of conscience. Let's go to Yasmin. You can unmute yourself now, Yasmin. Thank you very much. All right. All right. UN Human Rights Council is one avenue for legal action. You mentioned, of course, you are part of MAB. mean, I haven't really. I guess MAB is a bit more political than the likes of MCB. What other organizations are you working with, or Yasmin, do you know that are actually involved in highlighting this case of what's happening in France? And what are the other actions that can that people can get involved in to try to raise the contradictions that we're seeing in France?
So we're working along with many organizations. We have organizations from within France, from within the French Muslim community. We have organizations all the way from South Africa, Australia. So there's quite a range of organizations. This is the first of its kind of a global coalition working together on this issue. Regarding what we can do, there's a lot that we can do. Again, I highlighted that these aren't issues that have been taken. These aren't issues that have just recently happened. These are issues dating back to 1989, and somehow it's being allowed to pass. We must, in our own capacities, hold the French government to account, and there's many ways that we can do that. We can do that by raising our.
Sorry, Yasmin, just before you continue, I mean, I'd be interested to hear with regards to your communication and some of the coordination work that you're doing with some of the French organizations. Tell us more about that on the ground from France, what is happening and what the community is trying to do in France. I'll be really interested to hear that too, if you can.
Yeah, of course. So there's a lot of action happening down with French Muslim organizations within France. So we have a lot of, for example, student organizations working within the education sphere to tackle this issue. One of the organizations that was very active within this was CCIF. Now, CCIF is one of France's biggest organizations tackling civil rights and holding the government to account when it comes to Islamophobia. Unfortunately, they were one of the organizations that was dissolved by the French government and had to have their offices moved out of France. Nevertheless, they're still working outside of France to hold the government to account and take legal routes in order to come back into France. So there's a lot of arm twisting when it comes to community leaders within France and when it comes to taking action against the government, as Robert had mentioned. However, that isn't stopping the French Muslim community there. Again, this isn't anything new to them, and they're still continuing to work on the ground within all the different aspects of French society. Again, this isn't just limited to French government, it's within the society as well. So there's a lot of work happening within a legal level to tackle the government, but also efforts on the ground at a grassroots level to tackle French society as well, and to show how wrong that this is happening, and that the violation of rights against Muslims is actually a problem that affects all French society, and these are everyone's civil rights that are being violated.
Thank you very much, Jasmine. Very articulate. Thank you. And Robert, I mean, it's a very similar situation to sometimes how the Muslim community actually experiences and feels, some of these, some of these actions from politicians, even here in the UK, for example. I mean, France has obviously taken it to a next level with some of its actions that it's actually taken. What are your thoughts with regard to? I mean, I think you mentioned earlier some of the interaction that you've had with people in France. It'd be great to hear a bit further about that. But what about in terms of the UK and some of the organisations that you're involved with here or you're speaking to here? Well, what's been happening from your perspective?
Well, Islamophobia is not a French problem only. It's a European-wide issue, and it is on the rise across the board. Here in the UK as well, there is a lot of Islamophobia, including within the political elite. So high-ranking, the government, for example, is described as one of the most Islamophobic governments we've ever had. And I think that sentiment does ripple down into society as well. There's no doubt in my mind that we live in an age now where it's literally okay to hate on Muslims, and it's defended by politicians in many cases. It's described as freedom of speech, for example, but then when Muslims try to exercise those same freedoms to defend Islam, freedoms to criticize Western imperialism, for example, we're literally demonized as extremists. And unfortunately, if the Muslim community doesn't unite in itself and fight its own cause, then of course we're basically going to be divided, leaderless, and vulnerable. And I think that's why it's so important that we really use the momentum that's come out of Macron's essential crusade against Islam to try and build upon these movements. So what the NGOs have done issuing this complaint, like Yasmin said, it's the first of its kind that international coalition of NGOs, Muslim NGOs, has come together in this way. That's very encouraging. I think the boycott call against France as well was a very encouraging step. But what Muslims we seem to do is, after a period of action, it then dies away and we kind of lose interest. We really have to try and keep the momentum going.
I've got about 50 seconds left. I want to give that to Yasmin. I mean, a key message from Robert: Muslims need to unite. And it's great to see young Muslims, coming together, mobilizing political action, putting pressure and trying to do as much as they can. Obviously, we're living in a virtual world at the moment. We can't get onto the streets because of the current restrictions. Tell us something positive that's happening amongst those kind of age group amongst the Muslims with regards to some of the mobilization activities in 30 seconds.
So there's been a lot of effort by youth and student organizations within France. Of course, giving because we're during a pandemic and because most of our stuff is online, that has given a globalized effort and unprecedented access into different. So there's been an international solidarity like none before, and people have been expressing their solidarity from all across the globe with French Muslims, and that has encouraged a lot of French Muslim organizations to continue their efforts, and it's something that we should keep going.
Right. Thank you very much, Yasmin and Robert Carter. Thank you very much for joining us on Friday Night Live. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum. Right, listeners, that was Brother Robert and Sister Yasmin. We were discussing the situation in France. We're going to go into a commercial break. We'll be back.
This program will continue after the break. Continue listening to Inspire FM. Inspire FM.
Inspire 105.1 FM.
Assalamu alaikum, I'm Persephone. And this is Romy. We're from British Muslim TV Sisters Hour, and keep listening to Inspire FM 105.1 FM.
With Golden Globe, the efficient energy partner that can help you access government grants, you can turn your drafty, cold and expensive to run home into one where you can enjoy warmth and comfort for less. Whether you're a homeowner or landlord of rental property, you could be entitled to up to £10,000 towards external wall, cavity and underfloor insulation. Homeowners can claim up to 100% grants for broken boilers, and your Golden Globe survey is free. For details, call 0800 999 5097 or click on goldenglobeltd.com.
बेडफोर्डशायर में कोविड-19 के केसेस बढ़ रहे हैं और अब अस्पतालों में दाखिले पहले से कई ज्यादा हैं। वायरस के फैलाव को रोकने और जान बचाने के लिए हम सबको अपना किरदार अदा करना होगा। बराए करम घर पर रहें। जब हमारा दूसरे लोगों से राब्ता होता है तो वायरस फैल सकता है, लिहाजा आप जितना हो सके राब्ते को महदूद करें। अगर आपको बाहर जाना हो तो मास्क इस्तेमाल करें, अपने हाथ धोएं और दूसरों से फासला रखें। 3 में से 1 फर्द अलामत नहीं दिखाता। हम सबकी जिम्मेदारी है अपने खानदान, दोस्तों और कम्युनिटी की हिफाजत करें। मजीद मालूमात के लिए विजिट करें www.luton.gov.uk/coronavirus.
Did you see that guy on TV?
What, that no comment guy?
Yeah, he was sick. What was his name?
I think it was Atiq Malik.
Yeah, Atiq Malik of Liberty Law Solicitors. Atiq Malik heads up the criminal law team at Liberty Law Solicitors, specialising in everything from serious crime down to road traffic offences.
To find out more or for a free telephone consultation, call 01582 459955.
Liberty Law, there when you need us most.
लूटन में एक आलिशान बैंक्वेटिंग वेन्यू क्रेसेंट हॉल,
शादी ब्याह, मेहंदी और मंगनी के अलावा कॉन्फ्रेंसेस के लिए भी एक शानदार वसी वेन्यू,
जहां किचन, ब्राइडल रूम, फैमिली रूम और प्रेयर रूम की सहूलियात भी हाजिर हैं और पार्किंग का भी कोई मसला नहीं।
हमारे रेट्स निहायत मुनासिब हैं। आज ही राब्ता कीजिए।
मजीद मालूमात के लिए नंबर 01582723386 पर फोन करें या crescenthall.co.uk पर विजिट करें।
क्रेसेंट हॉल आपके इवेंट की शान बढ़ाए और इसे यादगार बनाए।
With you 24 hours a day. Inspire.
Waiting to become a mum. It's a funny time. New things to think about, new feelings, and sometimes new worries. If at any point something just doesn't feel right, we've got a simple message. Just speak to your midwife. They're ready to see you safely. And if you've got a checkup booked in, rest assured, we've taken all the necessary steps to look after you and your baby. Just be sure to see us, your NHS maternity team. Help us help you.
It doesn't take much to bring some difference. You give some change, which makes a change. Because nothing gets mileage like a charity. Just a little change turns into a chain. And before we know it, the results are massive. So give a little to make a big difference. For donations, call now. UKIM 0207 387 2157.
This is Inspire FM 105.1, broadcasting from the heart of the Tone. We're bound to keep you listening with great, inspiring daily shows.
From the studios of Inspire FM, the time is now 7:30.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to Friday Night Live, or this Friday, the 22nd of January 2021. It is just past the half an hour. We're looking at 7:31, and we are a Friday Night Live, and we are Inspire FM, broadcasting live on 105.1 FM. Assalamu alaikum to all of our listeners. Our partner stations, Sheffield, Link FM, Peterborough, Salam, Derby, Nottingham, wherever you are, 01582 481 822, 07779 481 822, 07779 481 822 is the number for any of your messages, inshallah. Do remember to like us, like our show, and do remember to follow us, leave us your comments on any of the stories that we've covered this evening. And subhanAllah, we are already toward the last of our stories for this evening. We've covered the US, we've covered US politics, we've covered Biden's inauguration, we have discussed the Vale cemetery flooding earlier, and we were then just discussing the situation in France earlier with some of our expert guests, some fantastic guests that the producers have lined up. Thank you very much for that. We are now swiftly going to start discussing our last story of this evening. And this is a very personal story for me, to be honest with you. And I was completely taken by surprise this week, because as traditionally I do, I look at a number of different organizations and websites and news stories. And I was actually browsing Cage's website when I saw these headlines, and subhanAllah, Australian professor and son released from secret jail in Qatar. Now, what struck me about this story was the picture of the professor. Now, this Australian professor, Professor Luqman, is someone that I knew in 2007 when I was actually out in Kuwait working in Kuwait. I met this family, and I met his sons, and I met his, extended family, and spent, almost a year with this brother. And he was such a lovely professional brother, a very, very senior brother in the community, a very respected brother in the community, being a professor at university, at one point actually a dean of his department. Then he actually went and moved on in terms of his job, went to Qatar with his family. I remember speaking to him. I visited his family in Sri Lanka during my work travels out in Sri Lanka. And that's the last I heard of him. And then suddenly this week, I was browsing the Cage website, and lo and behold, I see the headlines that the Australian professor and his son have been taken into custody in a secret cell or secret location, secret jail within Qatar, and held without charge for almost 6 months and allegedly tortured. I mean, it was such an emotional story to read that, because this individual that I've known in 2007 was an incredible human being, incredible family, very, very hospitable people. And those are the experiences that I remember of this particular brother. Let's speak to Cage. Let's speak to the head of casework at Cage, Sister Naila Ahmed, who's been covering this story, inshallah ta'ala. And let's get some background, let's get some further information, let's find out what's been happening. Of course, unfortunately, subhanAllah, I'm 6 months too late. 6 months too late, because when I actually saw the headlines, I thought the brother was still under detention, and then I saw the further news stories and realized, or I believe that the brother was then released, and alhamdulillah has arrived in Turkey. Sister Naila, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Walaikum salam wa
rahmatullah. Your voice is a bit low. You'll either have to put your volume up or speak a bit louder. Right, so Sister Naila, welcome to Friday Night Live. You probably just heard my introduction to the story. Give us an update in terms of, I mean, for me, it's so unfortunate. I'm 6 months late, and the brother's already out, and I almost feel, that I let the brother down. I wasn't able to get involved. I wasn't able to raise media attention. I wasn't able to support, and it goes to show how important the work of Cage is in highlighting such stories. But give us a bit of background in terms of when this came to light for yourself as Cage, and how long you've been working on this case, and any more background that you can give us. Sister Naila? Hello? Right, it seems assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam. Sorry, I don't know if the connection's a bit bad. I'll try my best, inshallah.
No, I can hear you loud and clear now.
Alhamdulillah. So yeah, obviously the family came to us. Actually, the first time it happened was in July. So Dr. Luqman and his son Ismail were arrested at that time. Obviously, thinking that there's no real allegations here, there's no charges. The family didn't think that it would even reach as long as it did. They thought, oh, this is all a big misunderstanding. Unfortunately, even after the Australian embassy were involved, there was no real change, and their condition was worsening. Dr. Luqman's health was worsening, and it was at that point that the family were aware of Cage, and through some contacts that we know, they reached out to us. And it was it was end of November or early December. So from that point onwards is when we sort of started supporting on the case, and almost immediately it was quite clear that every other avenue had been explored, in terms of communications within Qatar, communications with the embassy, the Australian embassy, because of course they're Australian nationals, and nothing was shifting. And so we thought the next, appropriate step is public advocacy and media. And of course, like yourself and others who knew him, they were just, it's so shocking to see, to see what has happened to him. And of course, there are now also long-term effects in terms of their health, from the torture that they had to endure. And we do feel that the media campaign and the publicity around it did help contribute towards them being released, alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Sorry, there's some interruption there. I mean, it just goes to show the importance of the work that Cage, mashallah, does. And we're really appreciative of that. You said that the family came to you in November or December, but of course he was arrested in July, and then of course through the months of August and September, you can imagine that they were trying to exhaust all the avenues that were available to them and open to them before they actually approached yourself. So tell us, take us through that journey. I mean, because there's a lot of questions that are raised here, aren't there? I mean, being an Australian citizen, and sometimes we live in this kind of a mirage that I'm a British citizen, I'm living out in Kuwait, or, and I've lived out in that region for 7 years, 8 years, but we know these countries are literally almost police states, because you can't have a conscience. You have to live without a conscience, and if you have a conscience and you say something, then you might well end up in a similar situation. And I know Professor Luqman, and I know he was a person who was an exceptional individual, but also, motivated by what was happening around the world. But tell us more about, the background when the family approached yourself, the avenues that they had exhausted, and in particular, I'm interested in this mirage to wake up a lot of people that being a British or an American or an Australian or a Western citizen doesn't actually afford you any additional rights. And in a lot of cases, these countries turn out to be as complicit as the originator country.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think there's multiple questions that need to be asked here. The role of Qatar can't be understated. They were the ones who picked him up. Eventually his job was stripped from him because he was in detention. His right to remain in the country. They were torturing him all this time. And so Qatar do have answers. They've got answers to give in terms of what they were doing and what their role was. But we're also aware of other states and other state involvement. One of them being the US, and we do. There are serious questions that need to be asked here. 3 months into the detention of Dr. Luqman, his son, who's based in Australia, the US announced US financial sanctions against him. Now, obviously, given the timeline and given that now we are actually aware that some of the interrogations were about his son in Australia, to him and some of the other men that were detained, there's a strong indication that suggests that, was this done at the behest of the US? And why is Qatar, doing their dirty work? Of course, we also know that Qatar hosts one of the largest military bases in the Middle East for the United States. So, they do have a role to play. Although, of course, by and large, you see them as quite a good country, and I'm sure a lot of Muslims live there quite happily. But at the same time, it's a lot more complex, and it's not so straightforward that this is a good country, this is a bad country. But yeah, definitely there are questions to be asked. Furthermore, Australia as a state, since the release and since we've been able to have more communication, we've been made aware that actually Australia knew of their detention as early as the day after he was arrested.
So let's Australia and some explicit, some of these other countries that are complicit, and let's just focus on Qatar. I mean, it wouldn't be of any surprise that Qatar was actually instructed, right, to pick up Professor Luqman. I mean, Professor Luqman has been living in Kuwait for years. Before I went in 2007, he'd been there for a number of years, well established. He was in Qatar for such a long time, such a respected, like I said, dean of his department. Won notable awards, right? Well recognized as a professional in the community. So for this to happen all of a sudden, without the behest of a foreign power, would be very, very surprising. Is there any evidence to suggest what prompted the picking up of Professor Luqman at all in your research so far?
Not at all. And this is kind of the family do still want answers. What happened? Why were they picked up? What were the alleged charges? There were no charges. So what were the allegations? There were no allegations. It was all very all done very secretively, actually. The family actually weren't in touch for a good 37 days. They were held incommunicado, so they had no idea what had happened to them. They had no idea if the state even had them. When they were in communication with the state denied taking them. They said they're not in our care or in our custody. So those things are still unanswered, and I think the family will be pursuing that further, inshallah.
Absolutely. I mean, subhanallah, from a lot of the other case studies that Cage gets involved in, and some of the sort of stories that we generally hear, subhanAllah, the fact that he's been released after 5 to 6 months, alhamdulillah, is a huge sigh of relief and a huge blessing, because that, I mean, generally you see that people that get picked up like that, unfortunately, stay a lot longer, before you do get, any form of communication, never mind release. So alhamdulillah, that has actually come about. Do you think, I mean, that was at the behest of the kind of public opinion that was raised, public media attention that was being brought upon their case from the likes of Cage and any other organizations? Were the family were the family involved through any other third party in raising that public opinion? What was the family? What were the other avenues that the family have been pursuing?
So they were pursuing, conversations within Qatar with organizations on the ground and officials as well, trying to understand why they're being detained and what their concerns are, which they came back with nothing, basically. The Australian embassy were involved from October, and they didn't really raise any of the torture concerns. They didn't take any of the torture concerns seriously. We have now been made aware that they visited them only once in November at the secret detention site. So the Australians knew exactly where they were being detained, but they didn't inform the family of this location, which, they were held, I think, in 2 different sites for 5 months. It was in secret detention. And Australia's complicity here is very shocking. And, these things will be pursued, but it's something for us as a public as well to raise these questions, the public campaign, I do think that was a turning point. Of course, we never know, we never can say for certain that this resulted in that, but we can say the timeline. I think the story was made public around mid-December, and then they were released from custody and released from secret detention into the deportation center a week and a half or 2 weeks later. So we can definitely say that it played a role in that, inshallah. And of course, it's all Allah. In the end of the day, our actions, Allah wants us to see action and to do things, but at the same time, it's all in His hands. Alhamdulillah.
Yeah, subhanallah. So, Naila, of course, you're in touch with the family, inshallah, and do communicate our regards and our thoughts and our prayers for Dr. Luqman and family, inshallah. But I mean, of course, the latest report was that they've arrived in Turkey and receiving urgent medical attention. I mean, I read on one of the stories that Professor Luqman had almost lost 25 kgs in body weight. I mean, subhanallah, incredible stuff. And of course, they'll probably be in Turkey for a while until his health condition stabilizes and they're able to make this long journey back to Australia. It might be a bit premature of me asking, but what are the next steps? Because of course, a lot of unanswered questions. 6 months without of arrest, detention, without any charges. Australian embassy being involved from second day and not really providing any real assistance. And quite frankly, a lot of these governments, I don't want to make allegations here, end up to be complicit in a lot of these crimes. There's a long, and I know Professor Luqman's family are fighters, are campaigners, right? So there's gonna be a long road ahead to campaign to get some justice, to get some answers, and put some of these governments in the dock, quite frankly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, of course, I think the present sort of concern is Dr. Luqman's health and the health of the other men who are also detained with him. Of course, with torture, there are physical effects, but there are also psychological effects, and that is the top priority before anything. But yeah, obviously, without going into too much detail, of course, these things need to be discussed and decided still. But I'm sure that the family will be pursuing all legal avenues open to them, inshallah.
Yeah, absolutely. And is there any news? I presume it's been a couple of weeks now, inshallah, if not longer, since Professor Luqman was released and he's in Qatar, in Turkey. Any update with regards to the health of Dr. Luqman?
No real update yet. He's still seeking medical attention, or trying to seek medical attention in Turkey. So there's not much more we can go into at this point. But inshallah, if there are any updates, we'll be updating on our social media platforms and on our website as well. So cage.ngo. If you check there, inshallah, and on our Facebook and Instagram, inshallah. If you follow us, we will be providing updates in due course, inshallah.
Sure. Dr. Luqman is one brother, unfortunately, that has gone through this experience, and subhanallah, there's so many more. I mean, another name that comes to mind is Naveed Butt, and I don't know if Cage is involved at all with the case of Naveed Butt from Pakistan, that was one of these individuals that has been missing for I think 6 or 7 years. I think 6 years. But I mean. The list of such brothers, unfortunately, and the cases that probably are coming to Cage are probably you're probably being inundated, because this is the current climate that we're living through. Just take us through, the current kind of workload and cases and the kind of demand on your services that you're kind of experiencing, Sister Naila.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you think of torture and all of these things, and you think of Guantanamo, and you think of the early years, back in 2001 and maybe 2003. And unfortunately, we are still seeing it to this day. There are British citizens that it's happening to abroad, and other citizens, like you've mentioned, Brother Naveed. I mean, this is an unfortunate reality of the world that we're living in, and the effects of the war on terror. It is continuing. But it doesn't, our cases don't just sort of, they're not always at that end of the spectrum, which is the worst end really when you think of torture. But of course, there are people who are stopped at airports every single day. We get calls from people all the time, stops under Schedule 7, MI5 harassment. So, security services trying to, get information from the Muslim community or get them to inform on the community. You have Prevent referrals. So I'm sure you've mentioned Prevent on your program before. It's a duty on public officials to refer or to at least have due regard to this legal obligation. Unfortunately, we do get a lot of these types of cases. Families unsure of what their rights are. Even police doorstepping. And I think in lockdown, that's been one thing that we've definitely seen an increase of. Or police just turning up at somebody's door and just saying, "Oh, we want to have a chat." And of course, you don't have to speak to them. You're not under arrest. You're under no obligation. And if you do speak to them, you should do so with a lawyer, and that's your right. It's your right to speak to them. But of course, they'll try and make you feel like you can't. So yeah, there's a whole array of different types of cases that we deal with. And unfortunately, being in lockdown or being in the midst of a pandemic hasn't necessarily slowed them down at all. We've seen in some ways they've amped things up, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, when I read this story, and the question from one of our listeners who's asking, what about his son, Ismail Talib, and not only Ismail, but then also his brother, and the son of Dr. Luqman, Ahmed Luqman, in the States was also, or in Australia was also then, I don't know, interrogated, questioned, or arrested, right? But I believe his son Ismail was also released. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, alhamdulillah. There were him and a few other men that were also detained. They've been released, alhamdulillah.
And subhanAllah, one of the listeners is asking this question. I mean, I know the sons and even the daughter Maryam and Ismail. I knew them in 2007. They were very, very young kids then, just small kids running around. And subhanAllah, as I said, a lovely family and lovely children, mashallah. And would make any parent be proud of having children like that. It's just incredible, the kind of world that we're living in, without any allegations being just picked up and put into incarceration for 6+ months. Subhanallah. And the last quick question with regards to, I mentioned the case of Naveed, but is that a case that has come to Cage at all? Sister Naila, are you aware of that case?
We are, yeah.
Sorry?
We are aware of the case. Yeah, I mean, it is unfortunate. There are again, it's one of those things that often a lot of avenues are explored, and I know there have been many sort of pleas for his release over the years, or even just his location. But yeah, I mean, it is something that we are aware of.
And is it really, I guess it's obvious that it's probably some countries that are a bit more receptive to to responding when it's public pressure and media attention is upon them. I mean, other countries couldn't give any care whether there's media attention or not. Egypt being one of them, perhaps, but it has to come to some pressure in some instances. What about Pakistan as a country, which is also quite notorious for these kind of political figures going missing? But how is Pakistan with regards to when political pressure, media attention is put on Pakistan to take action? For example, in the case of Naveed, but are you getting any response? Are you getting any people of conscience that are willing to put up a struggle and represent such causes within Pakistan?
I mean, I think it's very difficult, and of course, we're a UK-based organization, but sometimes people contact us from all over the world, and what we can do and what we can't do is sometimes based on that and based on our capability. In Pakistan, I'm sure there must be movements or there must be groups on the ground trying to fight and raise awareness. I'm not, personally aware in terms of what would be the pressure point for Pakistan and what would be the, I don't know if they succumb to public pressure. Maybe with the new government, there may be a bit of a shift, but they've also, again, they've got their interests, whatever their interests are as a state, that will take priority over everything else. So yeah, I'm not too sure on that one. Sorry.
No, that's fine. Sister Nana, Jazakallah khair for joining us this evening and giving us a very, very valuable update. I think for our listeners who are not probably aware of this particularly individual, this brother, I think the lesson to take away is that anyone is prone to, susceptible to, being in a similar situation to Brother Luqman and how he has gone through this experience. And we all need to be aware of the current political legislation that is being used. I mean, in Britain, very intelligently, very cleverly. In France, very frankly and openly. And in some of the GCC countries where, as you were saying earlier, Sister Naila, you could go out there, you live there, and you think, wow, what a comfortable and an easy place to live in, all the luxuries and the conveniences of life. But then you have these dark realities that you also have to face up to. Very, very quickly, if you can, inshallah ta'ala, do communicate and pass on my regards to the family, and we will make this video available, inshallah ta'ala, and we'll try to
just to add on that, if I can, for the community who are listening, inshallah, just to highlight the importance of our obligation as Muslims to the prisoners and to those who've been separated from their families. Sometimes there isn't much we can do but make dua, but then sometimes there's articles that are going up there, share it, show your support in whatever way you can, and there's always something that we can do. So inshallah, that's an obligation on us all as a community, and of course Cage are trying to fulfill some of that, but of course we always need your support as well, inshallah.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. We have now Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Right, listeners, that was Sister Naila from Cage giving us some valuable update with regards to the case of Professor Luqman and his family that were arrested, put into prison in a secret location within Qatar, and then subsequently released 6 months later without any charges. Subhanallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give reward and patience and a full recovery to Professor Luqman and family. And folks, that's it. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. It is Hafiz Sha'ban. It is Friday Night Live. It is the 22nd of January. Until next week, signing out. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.